I was asked to make a film about protest for the BBC. This is an interview with Blair Imani, a 22-year-old Black Lives Matter protester. Imani travelled to Baton Rouge after the shooting of Alton Sterling was filmed and went viral to take part in a vigil. Can you tell me what happened on July the 10th this year?
I came from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. I was just very excited that I was going to be working with these young organizers for a peaceful protest, and that protest went beautifully. And afterward, the children had spoken. We just had a lot of sense of community and coming together, and a lot of people were still very energized. So we came back to the church where we had started, and we were deciding what to do next. People wanted to march. People wanted to move forward. While we were deciding to do this, things escalated very quickly. The police had flanked us on all sides, and it's kind of a blur. I look back at pictures and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I was there, and it's kind of surreal. But after the police had flanked us on either side on East Street next to Government Street, a SWAT truck came in and a tank came in with weaponized sound, and they pointed a gun at me and at my partner. And I started crying. The entire time I was hyperventilating. It was so very scary. Afterward, my partner and I tried to usher people onto the other side of the street as ordered by the SWAT team. After about an hour, the SWAT team came in. Once we were on private property, we thought we were safe. The SWAT team wouldn't come in. But they dragged me and several other people to the ground and put me in zip ties, and that's the abbreviated version.
They put you in zip ties?
Yes.
What's the long version?
The long version? Absolutely. Well, where should I start?
Or maybe with the zip ties.
Sure. So when I was standing on the lawn with my partner, we were holding hands. I'm shaking now even thinking we were holding hands. I kept saying, they aren't going to hurt us, or they're going to hurt us, they're going to hurt us. And he's like, no, they're not. We're on private property. We're not doing anything wrong. And then I turned my head, and I just see a wall and like an army of police coming toward us in riot gear with masks. And it was an out-of-body experience, almost. And the next thing I knew, I'm being dragged on the ground, and I hear someone say, really give it to her. And I realized they were referring to me, and I did not know what that meant, so I started screaming. And then someone captured it on video. I'm being pulled out of the crowd, and I'm just screaming, and they were carrying me, and they started walking me behind the SWAT tank, and they said, really give it to her one more time. And I didn't know if that meant beat her out of view of the camera, so I just started screaming. And once the cameras started coming, they let me walk. But my hand had turned purple by this time because the zip ties were so tight. And after that, they walked us around the corner to process us, and that wasn't nearly as scary. And that wasn't as nearly as scary. It was kind of like I had survived something. The officers kept telling us that we were okay, and that was a kind of a moment of breath. But that was the start of a very long, what seemed like a very long day, even though it had, become the next day.
Where did they take you after that?
So they took us to East Baton Rouge Parish Prison.
What's the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison like?
It's the way I pictured it. You've seen movies about prison. It looked a lot like a school, like an elementary school with bars and with wires and, armed guards, which was very surreal because people speak about the school to prison pipeline, and the fact that it actually looks like a school is even more jarring. And so we were there, and we were not allowed to speak.
How long were you there?
I was there for 15 or 17 hours.
You were there so you were there overnight?
Yes.
Where did you sleep?
Well, by the time they had processed us, it was 3 a.m. By the time I had got to a bed, inmates were waking up at 4 a.m. So I just had time to lay down, try to get comfortable, and then it was time to wake up and be inspected. It was like a mad dash all day.
When you say inspected, what did that entail?
That meant turning over all of the beds, the sheets, to make sure that so we were put in a general population by that time. So that meant inspecting everything, the general population folks. Yeah, so people who have been convicted for armed robbery, or people who have been convicted for missing a court date, just a wide range of people. So they were just inspecting people, making sure that nobody had any contraband. A lot of folks were strip searched. Privacy wasn't a thing.
You weren't strip searched?
I was. When they processed us and had us change clothes, they had 4 of us in a dressing room and we had to strip completely, but I had already felt naked because my hijab was taken even before I got into the vehicle to be transported to the East Baton Rouge Parish prison. So it was just very violating and I felt very exposed.
How did it make you feel when you saw the police coming towards you at the first instance?
I was so scared and I thought like, I couldn't think fast enough. It was like, do I get on my knees and put my hands down so that would make it better? If I lay flat on the ground, that might be better. But by the time I could even have those thoughts, I was already being dragged to the ground and it was kind of like being manhandled, I suppose. But also, just the way that they spoke to us, like really give it to her, that's the loudmouth we want. There was no reasoning with the folks there and they weren't listening to us. I don't think they even saw us as human.
How did you think this would end?
The entire time, I thought that either I or my partner would end up shot because they had already pointed guns at us. And my mom was in the parking lot of the parking lot of the church just a block away. And at any time, I could have left and gotten in the car with her. And she was calling me, get in the car, get in the car. And I really felt if I left, somebody would end up dead. People, were very enraged because there were so many officers. They were armed and they were laughing at us. And some people were saying F the police. And we were like, just don't say that, Instead, let's say Alton Sterling and remember why we're here today. And so we're just keeping the crowd in a unified message. And I suppose to keep the crowd peaceful and compliant. And I just thought because I was doing that, maybe I wouldn't be treated so horribly, but that didn't matter. It was like an us versus them scenario.
You went through this experience. What happened next?
I was just perpetually disappointed at the way it was handled afterward. The fact that SWAT police were called in, the fact that I was maced in a prison along with 16 other women who were there with me because we were being too loud or being too enthusiastic, that other folks were getting out who had protested. But through all of this, I was just learning perceptions about the prison system. I was in a cell with 16 light women as well as 2 other people of color. We all had the same message. We all had the same feelings about what had taken place. And it really made me think, okay, if these folks are white and they don't directly deal with police brutality, they don't have people in their family who look like Alton Sterling, and they can still have empathy, that made me think, oh my goodness, we can have a chance to change so much more. One woman even spoke about her parents were against protests in the 60s and 70s, had spit on protesters who wanted to integrate schools, how they knew that, and then wanted to atone for that. And that's why they were there with us that day. So it was a horrible experience in that prison, but it really changed the way I look at humanity and forgiveness and the social changes that can be impacted. But after I had gotten out of prison, I was just exhausted. It wasn't until my partner and I were literally on the floor of my room and were just crying because we never thought we didn't think we were going to see each other again. We didn't know if we were going to live through this experience. I was shaking for about 2 days afterward. Later that week, I had just broken down in tears in my living room because it was such a surreal experience that I had survived it. And I don't think I've totally gotten into normalcy. Last Sunday when I saw the officers were shot, I felt the same sadness, especially when I saw Montrell Jackson. And before I knew the identity of the officers, I was so concerned that it was the officers who had been so concerned with my well-being and were so upset at the officers who had made my zip ties so tight and were wanting reform but had no whistleblower programs. I realized I had concern for these officers that we can, as a community, no longer have 2 conversations about violence and which violence to condemn.
So what did you do after the officers were shot?
I actually woke up to one of my friends calling me, telling me what had happened, and I canceled all of my plans that day. I was supposed to go to dinner with a friend. I was supposed to go to, actually, like a water balloon fight, but I didn't want to leave my house. It was just so scary because when anything happens to a community, it's just so jarring and so scary. So I had prayed a lot that day. And just looking at the articles, how immediately the media was trying to condemn, imply that the protest that I had participated in was the cause of the officers being shot. And I knew that not to be the case, and I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what to do. So after I had prayed in the evening. I was like, we need to do a vigil for the officers, and we need to do it in the same place that we did the vigil for Alton Sterling, because we need to show the community that all of our humanity matters. And hopefully, if they can realize me as a protester honoring and acknowledging the humanity of these officers, somebody who I'm allegedly supposed to be against, but hopefully, you know, the other side can recognize our humanity.
What was the reaction to the vigil?
So the vigil's actually happening now in Louisiana. As soon as I posted the event, I had law enforcement officers reaching out to me on Facebook, thanking me for doing this, and emails in my inbox. One man reached out to me and thanked me for doing this and said that he had changed his mind, how a week before he saw me as protesting and thought I was just angry, an angry agitator who was anti-police. And now he realized that that was anguish and pain in my eyes and fear. And he said he was going to pray. He was going to start to deconstruct his perceptions of black people, his perceptions of protesters.
So one of the police officers who is involved in mistreating you really reached out to you after you held this vigil. Mm-hmm. And how does that feel, that conversation?
It's overwhelming and surreal that there are so many people, and a lot of my friends are reaching out like this person on their Facebook. Or a lot of my friends are reaching out like this person on their Facebook has a Confederate flag in their room, you know? And you would think, okay, that means they are racist and that they don't value protesters and they think that we're all anti-police. Are starting to realize, because I have my cover photo on Facebook, is me getting arrested. And they're starting to realize, oh, we don't have to choose a side. There are no sides. And I was like, nobody deserves to die by the hands of a gunman, whether he's a police in uniform or it's, you know, a lone gunman, because that's not the world I want to live in, where humanity is extinguished because of choices we've made in the past or decisions we've made in the past or actions that we've committed in the past. So I'm sorry.
So Blair, what's next for you?
I just kind of feel, I felt this way before, but I feel like even more compelled to organize people, to speak to young people, to speak to young folks, to get people to be, you know, to realize that they too can be leaders and that we all have a position in the movement and we can all affect change and make the world a better place.
The man who pulls the trigger and shoots another individual feels no empathy for that person. Why do you have so much empathy for your fellow human beings?
Well, first, I'd like to contest that we aren't born killers. We aren't born criminals. We are born, you know, we are all born innocent into this world, and it's just, you know, a series of choices and of, you know, socialization factors that just culminate in who we become and actions that we take and the violence that we impart on others and the kindness that we impart on others. I guess in kind of my view of all of this, that we can't keep thinking about it as if you've done one awful thing in your life, you're an awful person. I think that everyone can be kind of, you know, hopefully reformed, can change, can like feel for the people that they've hurt.
Do you consider yourself a brave person?
I actually have this bracelet that says brave, and I wear it because I want to be a brave person. I feel like a lot of the time I'm very scared and very nervous, and I don't go into many situations being completely fearless. I aspire to be brave, and a lot of folks have called me brave. So I don't know.
Thank you. So let's get a couple of chairs.
And let's get a round of applause for our saxophonist.